Hello, my name is George Bina, and I will be your host today. Welcome to a new Oxygen XML editor webinar. I have invited my colleague Octavian Nadolu to talk about enforcing editing rules in Oxygen XML. And Octavian did a lot of work related to a number of technologies that can be used to achieve this enforcing of editing rules and helping the users to create structured content. And we decided that it will be better to split this in two presentations, two webinars, two sessions. The first one that we have today will show you more about what can be done, and the next webinar that Octavian will present will focus on how you can implement this. So it will be more related to the technology behind about enforcing editing rules. We hope to convince you with the benefits that you will see today to attend also the following webinar, which will focus more on the technical aspects behind this. The usual questions that we receive are whether the webinar is recorded or not, and the webinar today will be recorded, and we will make the recording available shortly after the webinar. You'll receive a notification when that is available. And if you have any questions, please use the questions panel in your GoToWebinar interface and ask questions at any time during the session. I will be here, and I will respond to your questions as you ask them. And at the end, we will go together with Octavian through the questions and respond them so everyone can hear the questions and the answers. That being said, I will give control to Octavian to start his presentation. So don't forget to ask questions as we go. You don't need to wait until the end to ask questions. Octavian?
Okay, thank you, George. Hello, everybody. My name is Octavian Nadolu, and in this presentation, I will show you how Oxygen guides the authors through the editing process and helps them to follow different rules in order to get the documents in the format that they want. So here's an overview of the presentation. I will start by showing you how Oxygen helps you to choose the correct markup in different situations when you are editing structured documents. Then I will show you how you can impose different rules, business rules on the document, and how Oxygen identifies problems in the document and signals this to the author, and also propose them fixes to solve them very easily. So when an author edits a document, he needs a set of rules in order to get a document in the format that he wants. These can be structure rules imposed by a schema or schematron, business rules, or styling, or even spell check or spelling rules. So the author should focus on the content that he is writing. This is the most important thing, not on the rules that he must follow. And Oxygen helps him to do this, to focus on the content and not necessarily on the rules, because Oxygen guides you through the editing process. So Oxygen guides you by allowing you to choose the correct markup. on different situations, and it shows you hints when you make mistakes, or when you are having documents that are not structured well, or it gives you solutions when you make mistakes. And in the final, you get the document in the format that you want. I took, like, for example, a simple document, a structured document. It's a topic which has some paragraphs and a list with some list items. And let's see how this document looks in Oxygen and how you can edit it. So I will switch to Oxygen, and I have here the flowers XML file. I'll open it, and we see that the document looks like this when you open it for the first time. So you don't see the structure of the document, and you can easily edit it. So you can type text here, for example, or you can add a new list item if you want, very easily. But you don't see the structure of the document. This document has a structure, so you can enable, if I enable the full text support from the toolbar, now we can see that we have some paragraphs here, some elements, some list items that you don't see when you start editing the documents. And this structure is imposed by a schema, which the author, it's not necessary to know the schema. So in my case, if I switch to the text page, I see that I have a topic DTD that is associated with my XML file. And this is the imposed structure of the document. In Oxygen, you can use different schemas to impose the structure. You can use DTDs, you can use XML schema, or XNG, or NVDL. What schema do you want to use? And when you want to insert markup, or when you want to style some elements, you can easily press enter, and you'll get in the content completion the elements or the markup that you want to insert. And Oxygen also presents you annotations to see what the element does, and links to the style guide or to the specification to understand better if you are new in the language that you are using. And let's switch to Oxygen to see an example. So in my XML5, for example, I will select the flowers garden text, and I want to mark it with bold. I just press enter, and a list will pop up with the elements that can be inserted in the current context. And we can see that for each element we have an annotation which describes what the element does, but you can also check the style guide by clicking this link, and it will open a page where the element it's described, and you have also other elements that are similar with the current one, so you can easily understand better what the element does. You have link also to the specification, and here you have more details. You have also examples with the element and so on. Then if you want to insert this, to mark this text with bold, select the element from the content completion, and we see that this is marked in the editor. Of course, if you go in other place in document, for example here, you can easily insert a paragraph, and you can insert other markup as you want. So Oxygen, it suggests you to insert the valid markup depending on the context that you are in, and also it presents you annotations and documentation for the element to easily understand what the element does if you are new in the language and if you don't know very well what each element does. Depending on the framework that you are using, you can have links to the specification or style guides to understand in which situation can be used an element, and what are the similar elements that can be used with the one that you selected. Then sometimes if you are using a larger framework, then you can have a lot of elements presented in a content completion list. In my example, I used a data topic, and if I'm in a paragraph, I get like 90 proposals. So there are a lot, and maybe you don't use all these proposals, all these elements in your project, and you have maybe you need just 10 or 50 proposals for your documentation project. Then Oxygen offers you the possibility to filter these elements. You can either filter them using a configuration file or by using a different schema, a simplified schema. And also you can render them differently in the content completion list. You can see that here the bold element is rendered with bold text, and here it's the B element. The italic also it's rendered with a name, and also here it's only I. So you can render them as you want, and this can be done very easily using a configuration file. And I will show you a simple example in Oxygen. I have here a flower slide. This is a lightweight data. It's a simplified version of the data, which has a limited number of elements and has a different schema which presents just a part of the elements from the full data. If I press enter here to surround this with bold, then I get just a few elements. See that? And I can easily select one. Then if I want to insert a paragraph, I also get just a part of the elements, and we see that the elements are rendered here with the names. So this is a good example of a framework that can be used as a startup to edit your documents. So Oxygen, it helps you to insert the right elements, but also allows you to filter them and use just the elements that you need for your documentation project. And maybe when you need more, you just change the configuration file and add more elements that will be presented in the content completion. And you can configure this very easily. I added here a link to the documentation to oxygenxml.com, where you can read more about how you can create a configuration file, and you can see there are examples also. There is the lightweight data framework, which is present in Oxygen, that can be used as an example, and see how we configure this for this framework, the elements presented. And there is also a presentation at XML Prague that also shows this support and how you can do this configuration step by step. Then Oxygen, it also shows you hints when you make mistakes or when you are trying to delete an element that it's required, or you insert an element that it's not allowed in a position in document, and helps you to understand what in which position can be inserted, or what other elements can be inserted there. And also you can change these preferences from the schema aware preferences if you want. Let's switch to Oxygen and see an example with this part. So I'll go back to the flowers XML file, and if I press here backspace to delete the title element, Oxygen will say that I cannot delete the title element because this is a required element. And if you want to change the preferences in order to allow you to delete this type of elements, then you need to go to the schema aware preferences page. And also, if you are trying to insert an element that it's invalid, for example, if I press enter here and I select an element that it's invalid, we see that in the content completion list it's marked with gray, and here it's presented a message and says that this element is not valid, but Oxygen will try to insert to add it in a valid position. So if I press enter to insert this element, we see that the element was not inserted in this position and was inserted after the title in the prologue element. This is a valid position for the element that I selected. So Oxygen does not just signal the problem, but also helps you to insert markup in the correct position. And it suggests you to insert it in that position, but also you can change the preferences in order to maybe create other constraints or allow the user to delete maybe some elements that that you want from your document. Then if you delete by mistake a required element, or maybe if you are using another application and you delete the elements that are required in the document, then Oxygen will show you that these elements are required and will mark this in the document, but also will help you to insert these elements in the document. So we'll propose you fixes to solve the problems. And also if you are inserting an element which requires some attribute values, then we'll show you the values that should be inserted for that element. So let's see this example in Oxygen. I have here a sample file which doesn't have a title, so it's a topic without a title, and we see that this is marked in the document, and we see that Oxygen shows me an error and says that the title element is required, that must be inserted in the document, but also shows me a solution and says, okay, insert the title element now. And if I click this, the element is inserted and I can type the title of the topic. Then if I want to insert here an element, I press enter, and if I select the Boolean element, we see that it shows me an error. It says, okay, you inserted an element which requires a value for the state attribute, and you need to select one of the valid values. And I can easily select a value for this attribute. So Oxygen, it proposed me solutions to solve different problems that appear in a document, and you can have multiple solutions as you've seen, and you'll have a better understanding of the problem if you see this solution. So even if you are editing a document in other application and you break the structure, then when you came back in Oxygen, then Oxygen will try to help you to solve these problems.
Before you go to the business rules, can I just summarize the first part?
Sure, George. Thank you.
So basically, using the schema information provides the first level of enforcing editing rules. And as Octavian presented, Oxygen really uses that information as much as possible. Along with that, you have also this layer with the configuration file, and I pasted also the link from our user guide that describes the structure and what that configuration file can do in the chat window. So if you look in the GoToWebinar chat window, you can find that link and find more about this configuration file, which basically provides another layer that you can apply on the schema to reduce the complexity. And it's a very interesting approach as it allows to start simple and then grow as you need with a document without changes to the DTD or to the schema that is used for that document. So in this first part, we're talking about schemas that define the structure of the document, and now Octavian will move to business rules.
Okay, thank you, George. So sometimes you cannot impose all the rules through the schema, and you need some custom rules that cannot be defined in the schema. And there are rules for titles, for IDs, or for section, and are specific for your project. And for example, in our documentation project, we have a lot of rules, and I will show you a document containing these rules. So switch to Oxygen. Let's close these files. And I have here an HTML file which contains a lot of rules and guidelines for our documentation and our grammar rules, styling. And if I go to the styling rules, here I have rules regarding the icons, regarding the images, the links, and are 100 or maybe more rules here. And it's very hard for an author to remember all these rules when he's editing the document. And it's better to have automatic checks and the application to pop up you these rules and show you, okay, you made a mistake here, please correct this. And also if a reviewer comes and he don't know all these rules, then he also will he will see these rules directly in the application, and he cannot do mistakes. So you need a set of rules that will be applied on all your documentation project, and to make sure that all the people follows the same rules when they are editing the documents. And these rules can be applied by someone, can be created. For example, in Schematron, it's a good idea because Schematron is a standard language and you'll not get stuck in an application. So you can use Schematron rules in any application that can validate using Schematron. So you can create these rules in Schematron and then apply them to your documents, and all the authoring team will follow the same rules, and the document, your document will be consistent. I split it here, the rules, in 4 categories. So there are simple styling rules or editing consistency rules, structure rules that cannot be imposed through the schema, and also output related rules. That these are rules which make sure that your output will be generated correctly. And I'll show you some examples now. So first, let's see some simple styling rules. In our documentation, we have rules like make sure that you don't use styling in the titles, because you want all the titles to look similar. Then another rule is make sure you don't use semicolon at the end of a list item. You either remove it or use full stop. Or another rule which it's a little bit hard to see when you are editing, it's that the text from the xref, it's similar with the href value of the element, and in the output will be rendered similarly. And when someone needs to change this link, then he needs to change it both in the text and in the value of the href. So you need to remove the text because it's redundant here. But it's hard to see this problem when you are editing if the application doesn't show you this. Let's see these examples in Oxygen. I have here a file containing these simple styling rules, and we see that how they are marked. And if you go on the first one, it says that I have a bold element here and I don't want to allow bold in my titles, and I can easily remove this styling from here. Then someone added here a semicolon at the end of a list item, and I can easily replace it with full stop or remove it. I'll choose to replace it with full stop, and now it's gone. And if someone adds here, for example, other semicolon, then he will see that there is a problem, and he will see also the solution. Okay, remove the semicolon because I don't want to have semicolon after my list items, and all my list items from our documentation will be rendered similarly. And this one, where the text from here said that is the same with the value of the href attribute, and we see it's a similar text. And if you remove this text because it's redundant, then it will be rendered similarly. So it will be the same rendering. There can be also other simple styling rules, like make sure you don't add empty titles, or don't exceed the number of characters from the titles, or make sure you don't add text directly in the section. You should add it in the paragraph. Or if you have a code block that contains XML, you should mark it as an XML because this will be rendered correctly then in the output. So you can create also other rules. Then there are editing consistency rules. There are rules like make sure you use an ID that it's equal with the file name for the topic. Don't use a generated ID. Or make sure you use IDs for the section. Then you can refer them easily in the output using the H tag. If you are generating HTML, you can refer the section. Or make sure you don't use consecutive lists, because you either add a paragraph with an explanation before the list, or you merge them into one because it's not necessary to have two lists here. And let's see these examples also in Oxygen. I have a file containing some editing consistency rules, and the first one, it says that I have an invalid ID here, and I must set the ID to the value of to the name of the file. We see here in the outline the ID that the topic has, and I can easily select to correct this. And now the value of the ID is set to the name of the file. Then here I have two sections, and they don't have IDs, so I can easily generate ID for the current section or for all sections from my document. And we see now that each section has an ID based on the title of the section. And now I can easily refer them in my output. Then here I have a list, and I see that here I have an extra space, but in fact there are two lists. So someone split it by mistake. So Oxygen shows me this because I added a rule and says, okay, you have two lists here, please merge them into one, or add a paragraph with an explanation, and I can easily merge them. You can add also other editing consistency rules, like IDs from your document, or some IDs should follow a certain pattern, or make sure you add IDs also to the lists, or make sure you don't use consecutive nodes, or another Another rule that we have in our manual is don't use oxygen inside the index term, or another one that says do not use optional text in a step, use instead the attribute importance with the value optional, because the step will be rendered with the text optional if you are using this attribute. Then we have structure rules. These are rules related to the structure, but that cannot be imposed through the schema, and are rules like make sure your table cells are added, so you have the same number of cells on each row, and we see that here with gray there are missing cells in my table. Then I want to make sure that I don't use too many nested lists, so here I have 3 levels of nested lists, and I want to use only 2 in my documentation project. And another one which says that make sure you don't use only one list item, because it's not appropriate to have only one list item. Either you add another item or just convert this to a paragraph. So let's see this in Oxygen. Have here a document containing some structure rules, and the first one, it's about the table rows, the table cells. So I don't have table cells here. These marked with gray are missing, and Oxygen signals this, and also I can choose to correct this by adding the cells that are missing. Then here I have 3 levels of nested lists, and Oxygen signals this and says, okay, you can use only 2 if you want, and you can convert this to some paragraphs if you want. And another one here, and you added here only one list item. Please add another one, or just convert it to a text, because you don't want to allow only one list item in the list. So I can easily add here a new list item, and I can say new flower. Then you can add also other structures, like make sure you don't use too many entries in a table, more than the number of columns, or make sure you refer an image in the figure element, or make sure you don't use DTDs and use XML schema in all your topics, or the menu cascade. Do not use only one UI control element in the menu cascade. Then you can have rules related to the output. So sometimes when you generate an output, maybe the engine that you are using to generate a specific output has problems with different characters or different elements, and you cannot fix this in the engine. Then you cannot impose some rules to the source file. Or maybe you want to look to make sure that your output looks like you want in when you generated it, and then maybe you need to add some constraints on the source to make sure that this output looks like you want. And a good example for this is if you are using a code block. For example, I have here a sample containing a code block which has a command line. And we see that this line is a little bit too long than these two. And when I generate the PDF, this line will be splitted. But this will make the command line invalid. If I copy this and paste it in the command line and I try to run it, then will not work. And then the user will ask us, what happens here? You added a line of code, but this doesn't work. Why did you add it? So you need to say this to the editor, to the author, and said, okay, make sure you don't add lines that are too long in your code block, because in PDF they will not be rendered correctly. And let me show you this example. I have here a code block, and if I generate a PDF with this sample file, then you'll see that the PDF will be generated with this line splitted here. And if I copy this from here and I paste it in my command line, then will not work. Then I can see the problem that is reported in Oxygen and see that, okay, you need to make sure that the code block, the lines from a code block should not exceed 80 characters, and your line has 93. So I can easily see the problem and then correct it. Add here a backslash, then enter, and now the line of code is rendered correctly, and I will save this. Let's close other files here. And then if I generate again the PDF from this sample, now I'll be sure that my PDF will be correct in the output. And if someone copies this, this will be correct. Then you can have also other rules related to the output. Rules like do not use quotes, for example, in the titles, because this breaks the Java health system, and maybe you cannot fix this in the engine that generates this help. And also do not use index term in other place than in Prolog, because this will not be rendered in the index term part in your output. And other problems like the figure element should be in a paragraph to be rendered correctly in the output, to have spaces between them, and others. So you need to create these business rules for your document in order to make sure that your project files will look similar, and you need to make sure that all your team will follow the same rules and you'll have the document structure as you wanted. And you can easily impose this using these business rules. You can easily impose rules for all your documents, for all your project. And if someone new comes to the project, then he will see the rules very easily. And if you want to add a rule, for example, in our documentation project, if someone finds a problem, then he reports this to a developer or to an information architect, which just creates a rule, and then all the authors will benefit of this new rule and will make sure that we'll follow the same rules. And in this way you make sure that all your team members will follow the same rules, and they will not make mistakes, and your document will be structured correctly. A good example for the business rules is the dynamic information model. This is an intelligent style guide which allows you to describe the rules, but based on the description of the rules creates also rules that are imposed in the editor. And you can check George Bina presentation from XML Prague, Schematron from Information Architects, to see how this can be done. This is an open source project and it's available on GitHub, and you can check it on this link and see how this works and how you can create business rules using an intelligent style guide. Then what we intend to do next. So we have users that are placed in different countries, and they need multilingual support, so they need the rules to be presented in their specific language. We added this support in the version 18 of the Oxygen. We want to add also for the fixed proposals multilingual support in order to make sure that they easily understand what the fixes are. This now can be done if you are using different schematron files to propose also fixes in different languages, but we want to create only one schematron file and then add the translation there in that schematron file, or maybe refer a file. We also want to allow user to report these business rules as an information or as a hint. Now we have to support to present them as errors or as warnings, but sometimes maybe you just want to see a hint there with a solution, maybe with just a couple of fixes, and we want to add this support in Oxygen. And also we want to improve the support that we have for the structure part to create more fixes that will help the user to edit the document easily and solve different problems that appear in a document. Even if you are trying to edit the document in another application and you come back in Oxygen, you can fix them very easily here. And also we want to add support for DTDs to create automatic fixes for the DTDs errors. There is a webinar next month where we will explain what happens behind and how the business rules proposals are created and how this will help you in different situations. So we'll start to code there. So please join us and you will learn more about this. So thank you. If you have questions or...
We do have a number of questions, Octavian. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Especially I like the business rules and what you can do with those automatic fixes. That's really very powerful.
Thank you.
So we received a number of questions, as I mentioned. Let's start with from the first one, which says, is the feature that configures the element drop-down list available in versions of Oxygen earlier than version 18? This functionality with that configuration file, which basically acts as a layer between the schema and what a user can see in Oxygen, or how the Oxygen will behave in some cases with respect to elements that are added automatically or values that are presented to the user, is new in version 18. It is really an interesting approach, as I mentioned a little earlier, that allows basically to start with a more complex schema, but expose only a part of what is possible to a user. So the user will not perceive the entire complexity of everything that is possible using that schema. So they can start and feel that it is easy for them to create content, and also focus on the structure that they care about. And that allows the document to evolve compared to customizing a DTD or a schema, because let's say you do not present the code blocks or program listing to the users, right? They cannot create that initially. But if you have a code block or a program listing in your document, there is no error because the actual schema allows that. It's only that the user will not be offered to easily create such an element. We are talking about program listing and so on, but the idea is that if you have a reasonably complex schema, maybe you have 150 to 100 possible elements. So if you want to involve someone to create content and present them from the start, all the no 100 plus choices, it may be too much for them. So this kind of configuration file allows you to create a profile so they can start easily and be exposed to more of what is available as they go. Another question, is it possible to export the schema so that it can be imported by another writer? Yes, of course. Once you have a schema or you customize the schema, you can use that with or others can use that schema. And there are two options mainly. Either you can refer that schema within the document, or you can set the application, in our case Oxygen, to automatically use that schema for specific documents that can be identified based on the root element or attributes that are set on the root element, or based on the document namespace, or based on the file name, or Oxygen has a framework that allows you to say, okay, this document is a dogbook document or a data document, and then if there's no schema specified, then use this specific schema. So either you specify, as I mentioned, the schema directly in the document, or you can have a tool setting, a tool configuration that will use that schema. Can you please explain in some more detail about schema and configuration? So as I mentioned, a schema usually defines the structure of the document and what elements are possible, when, where they can be inserted, what attributes, what values can be used for those attributes, and so on. And a schema will show the entire structure, possible structure, will contain the entire possible structure. And with this configuration file, we can have like a projection to show a simplified view to a specific category of users, let's say. And this configuration file allows you to rename elements. So for instance, rather than saying P, you can say paragraph. Rather than saying short desk, you can say short description to the user. And the lightweight data example that Octavian presented uses this functionality to basically rename all the elements. So you see it's a topic body section, or can you insert a short description, Octavian, maybe by pressing on the short description? Yeah, so this is rendered as short description rather than short desk. Although if we move to the text, we can see it's a short desk. Also, if allows to automatically insert, for instance, a title in the paragraph whenever a new section is inserted. So maybe you can also insert a new section, and we can see
And you want to insert a new
well, you should insert the this is true. You trigger basically a recovery action, but if you press on the section icon here that you have after the table, to right on the table, there's a section.
Okay.
To insert a new section after the table, there you have an action that inserts a new section. Left to the left.
Oh, okay. You have left.
Yes, that one.
This one. Okay.
Yeah. It will insert a paragraph automatically that is controlled by that configuration file. So there are a number of things like what attributes are available in, or what elements can be inserted in within some elements, and so on. So this configuration file basically it's an additional layer that can be applied after a schema to provide a simplified view, let's say a projection of that schema, and without requiring changes to the schema. Again, this is allows a simpler evolution of the document because you don't need to change the schema in the document. If you add some element that the configuration file excludes, the document is still valid because it's that type of document.
Yeah, and you can add easily new elements as your project will evolve. For example, maybe you start with a couple of elements, and then as your project requires new elements, you just allow them from the configuration file. You don't need to change anything in your schema or in your transformation, and the project will remain valid.
Yeah, so follow-up question exactly on this topic is how do you distribute a configuration file so that everyone in a team is using it? Oxygen has this notion of framework, which basically means a set of resources and configuration information to support an XML language. And we have default frameworks for data, lightweight data in this case, dogbook, and so on. And this configuration file is part of the framework, right? And you can extend also a framework. So. And these frameworks can be distributed through the add-ons mechanism that we have in Oxygen. So the users can go to help. Maybe you can show the help menu, Octavian.
The help.
And you have this install new add-ons, and then point to install new add-ons, and then this allows to point to a URL more or less like an application store where your customized data or dogbook framework is available. And then you can also, whenever you change the framework, like updating this configuration file, for instance, the users will be notified that a new version is available and they can update their framework that way. Another possibility is to set up a framework as part of a project, and this is what we have for our user guide. Then, I don't know if you have the user guide project, Octavian, but that.
Yeah, I think I have it here.
If you can open the user guide, then we can see that the user guide contains an extension of the data framework, and whenever the user guide project is opened, yeah, so if you go to options preferences, document type association, you see that this option is set at the project level.
Yeah, also
and if you scroll up, I think there should be the, yeah, so you have data extension, which is an extension of the data framework. And if you double click on that, we can see, for instance, on the validation tab, if you click on the validation tab and edit this validation here, we can see that we have this rules SEH file, which is from the project directory, which contains some of the rules that Octavian presented using, identifying code blocks, semicolons at the end of the item. But in the similar way, you can have another configuration file, for instance, that will, for whenever someone opens this project, they will have that configuration file automatically for data or for whatever frameworks you customize. Another question: are business rules also new in Oxygen 18? And the answer is that the base technology that we use to enforce business rules is Schematron, and Oxygen supports Schematron since many years. So the technology should be available also in previous versions of Oxygen. I think starting with Oxygen version 2, we supported Schematron.
Yeah.
However, the last release of Oxygen added a number of improvements, and especially improvements in this applying these automatic fixes, and improvements with respect to localization for messages, so message can be in different languages and so on. So we encourage people to always use the latest version of Oxygen, of course.
The presentation mode of the errors, because now are presented also on the tooltip and you can also see the fixes there on the tooltips maybe. So we still improving this support.
Yeah, so it was another related question that said whether this applying business rules functionality is available in Oxygen 17.1, and the answer is yes, but as we mentioned, there are of course some improvements in the last version. Do you need an add-on for the base technology, or is it inherent in Oxygen itself? Also about this schematron support, and the answer is that there is no need for any add-on. Oxygen supports schematron as a built-in functionality, so it to just work in Oxygen automatically without any need for any add-on. Well, where will the recording of the meeting be available? Octavian, if you go on our website under the events page, you can find here the entry for the current webinar. So this one, guiding authoring. So if you click on this, this is the page that now shows the registration link, but this will be replaced with the to contain the slides and also the recording. It will embed the recording of the webinar. The recording will be available also on YouTube. We have an Oxygen XML channel on YouTube, so all the recordings are available also on that channel. And I pasted the link to this page also on the chat window some time ago. One question is that Octavian is explaining what kind of rules can be made, but can he also show some of the technical details behind that, how they are implemented? And I don't know if Octavian can give you a small preview right now, quickly, but this is exactly the scope of our today's webinar, to show what can be done, and hopefully to make you interested in to discover how that can be done, and that's what we want to do in the following webinar that will cover exactly how these things can be done.
Yes, these are simple rules that you can create in schematron. So, for example, this one just checks the ID of a topic. So it creates a rule that matches the topic and checks the ID. And this is the only thing that you need. And if you want to provide also a fix, you just need to refer this fix, and this is the fix that you need to create to set the attribute value ID to the required value. So this is a very simple example that where the ID is corrected and instead it's used the name of the topic.
I think without going to the exact details, what we see here is, for instance, that there are basically 2-3 lines of code that implement this rule that will check and will correct the ID to be of the required format, for instance. And most of the checks that Octavian presented, most of the business rules are just a few lines of code. So that's an interesting takeaway, I think, for this, and hopefully you'll join us also in the next the next webinar to see exactly how this can be done.
What I want to explain also is that in my examples I associated the schematron directly with the oxygen, but as you've seen in our user manual, you can associate it directly with your framework. So all the files from your project will be validated with the same rules.
Someone also asked for the links to the schematron related presentation that I gave at XML Prague and to the Dynamic Information Model project. I pasted them also on the chat window, and the slides will be available, so you should be able to find all those links also by looking at the slides again. Can you define business rules for contributors using the web-based Oxygen? The web-based Oxygen XML Web Author product has two parts. On the server side, we basically run the same Oxygen core functionality. So that, and when you connect with the browser, you receive HTML5 and JavaScript as the user interface. So basically the browser is like a remote interface to Oxygen. And that means that on the server side, so the Oxygen XML Web Author will benefit of all the support Oxygen has for all schema languages, including schematron support. So business rules will be notified to the users also using the web editor. And the Dynamic Information Model project provides a way to create business rules just by editing a style guide. And that's another part where basically to create a business rule, you can use the visual editor in Oxygen, whether the standalone or the web-based editor, to actually create or modify a business rule. We have a number of thank you messages. Thank you for attending our webinar. And another question is, can we integrate Turtoise SVN with Oxygen? Turtoise SVN client is basically an integration of SVN, the level of an operating system. So of course that will work. But Oxygen itself contains an SVN client. Under the tools, you have the SVN client entry, and it's a full-featured SVN client that we sell also as a separate product. But this is included in any version of Oxygen editor, author, or developer. So it's available. There's also a separate script that will start only the SVN client if you prefer that. So yes, Turtoise SVN will work also with Oxygen, but Oxygen contains also an SVN client if you want to use that. So I think we are just a few minutes over the hour, and we managed to go through all the questions also. So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to meet you again in the part 2 of our of this enforcing editing rules set of webinars. Between them, we also have some data webinars. So if you are interested in data, you may want to check also the previous data webinar was 2 weeks ago, and it is available on our website recorded. The following one will be managing data reuse with Oxygen XML editor. And then we'll have the development part of this business rules, and then we'll move to data publishing with Oxygen XML editor. So these are the next webinars that are already scheduled. So thank you again. Thank you, Octavian. Really great session, and I can see that from the huge number of thank you messages that we receive.
Thank you very much for attending to our webinar.
Yes, so thank you for attending, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.